Today we're going to be installing some freewheeling hubs on the two front wheels of Dad's Isuzu MUX. This came about after we blew the diff up in the Barrington 6 weeks ago. The front diff blew. Yeah, been on this track for about 5 hours and done 2Ks, if that, a K and a half. Pretty much tow up the little hills, winch up the steep hills, and he can drive through the flat down hills and bits. And just got us thinking about certain situations and when you break things out of the bush, getting out of them, and these will definitely help if that happens again or you break an axle. I'll go into more detail about that in a sec. These hubs we got are Hulk 4x4 freewheeling hubs. They're the Isuzu or Isuzu design, I don't know how to pronounce that word. They're just basic hubs. Freewheeling hubs have a free position and a lock position. Free meaning the hub is not engaged. Lock, you engage the hub, allowing you to go into four-wheel drive. I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know the finer details too much, but I do know a bit of a basic overview of how they work and like what it does to your car. On four-wheel drives, you got two different types of hubs. You got first one being automatic hubs and the second one being freewheeling hubs. Dad's Isuzu, it's an Isuzu MUX. It did have automatic hubs, and we're going to change those over to freewheeling hubs. So to start with, your hubs are in your wheel. Your hubs are in here, and they engage your axle to your diff, allowing drive to get to those wheels. So they basically give drive to all those parts moving in that wheel and allow that power to come through. To go through a couple of questions that I see with hubs, installing freewheeling hubs, if you have a full-time four-wheel drive, it won't convert it back to a part-time four-wheel drive. It's not how they work. That's a different process. So installing freewheeling hubs will not change it to a part-time four-wheel drive if you do have a full-time four-wheel drive. Another question I see is hubs and diff locks. Your hubs have nothing to do with your diff locks. Diff locks are completely different. They're in your diff, and I won't go into that, but they basically send an even amount of drive to both wheels. They lock together so both wheels are turning together at the same time, so they're not free, independent of each other. Hubs have nothing to do with that. Now, a quick overview of how your engine and your drivetrain works. Starts in the engine, you get a force in there, a rotational force, which is also called torque. You probably hear that word torque. That sends your drive to your transmission through to your transfer case, which then sends it down your drive shafts to your diffs, out your axles to the wheels to get those wheels maneuvering. In a part-time four-wheel drive, normally rear-wheel drives like Dad's, it only goes, 100% of your power goes to the rear wheels, nothing goes to the front. Transfer case sends it all to the rear wheels. When you engage four-wheel drive, you get 50% to the rear wheels and 50% to the front wheels. So that transfer case splits that drive. Do a quick drawing here. Very basic drawing, but there it is there. I should add in. So this is the front, your engine's up here somewhere, transmission, transfer case. Engine through to your transmission transfer case in Dad's car, sends it down the rear drive shaft to your rear diff, splits it between your axles to your wheels. Nothing is happening in the front. When he engages four-wheel drive, this power gets split 50-50 both ways to all your four wheels. Alright, he has automatic hubs now, so why would we upgrade to freewheeling hubs? Automatic hubs are good because you don't ever have to worry about anything. I think that's one of the main reasons they put them on modern four-wheel drives now. They were more common in your older four-wheel drives, your solid axle four-wheel drives. You see your freewheeling hubs more often in the older days. But now, majority of your four-wheel drives are automatic hubs. And the good thing about automatic hubs is you don't have to worry about them. There's nothing there you have to engage or do. It's all automatic. Inside the car, once you switch into four-wheel drive, the hubs automatically engage and everything's getting drive to it. So you never have to worry about getting in and out of your car or whether your hubs are locked or anything like that. I think it's some sort of vacuum pump in there or something, switches them on, but they are constantly on that axle, so constantly keeping things rotating. So your hub in your front, this independent front suspension, it has CVs in the front, or axles, your two front CV axles. Hubs lock onto this axle and then they get turning. With an automatic hub, your automatic hub is constantly connected to this axle. So the axle is constantly turning with the hub and with the wheel. Freewheeling hubs are not as common, but they're a worthy upgrade if you are doing regular off-roading. What freewheeling hubs do is they disconnect the hub from your front axle. So we're all talking the front here because that's where we're putting them, on the front, not the rear. The rear is constantly engaged, constantly getting drive. It's a rear wheel drive car. But when we engage four-wheel drive, the hubs give drive to those front wheels. With an automatic hub, even when you're not in four-wheel drive, your axle is constantly moving, constantly rotating. It's not getting power through it because there's no power being sent from the transfer case, but it still is moving with everything else. That's what automatic hubs do. Now, compared to automatic hubs, where your automatic hubs are constantly connected to the axle and constantly turning, what freewheeling hubs do is they allow the hub to be disconnected from the axle. So in locked position, your hub locks onto the axle. When you turn it to free, it comes away from that axle. So it becomes a free object. So it is not moving when your car is driving. It is just sitting there. It may get a little bit of movement just from being bumped around or inertia, things like that, but is not actually moving with your wheel. It becomes a free object. Okay, so locked position, locked on, axle is moving. Disconnect, axle is there in a free position, wheel is just free on its own. It's not connected onto this axle. So you've got your steering arm up the front, and then you've got a shock there, that yellow thing, and behind it you've got your CV axle. Now with your automatic hubs, this axle is constantly connected. You cannot move it, and it constantly rotates with your wheels. Then you'll be able to see, once we put the freewheeling hubs on, this axle will be disconnected. When your hubs are in the free position, you'll be able to spin it around here, and then it's not rotating with your wheels. And you hear a click, and then it's in free, and there's a free axle that is rotating because it's now disconnected from the wheel. So that leads into the benefit of having your axle disconnected from your hub. The first one being, because your axle is not moving with the front of the car constantly, your axles are just sitting there. So you have a little lighter steering, a little less fuel use, and not as much wear and tear on those front components because they're not constantly moving. Even when you're in two-wheel drive, normally they're constantly moving with an automatic hub. With a freewheeling hub, they've stopped. They're not constantly moving. The second one being, you do two-wheel drive low range, because as long as your hubs are in the free position, once you go into four-wheel drive, you will not be in four-wheel drive because those axles are not connected to your hubs, meaning you can do two-wheel drive low range, which is a great one for people who are towing, manoeuvring boats around, caravans, in tight spots, and you still want to be in two-wheel drive. You don't want to have everything in four-wheel drive trying to bind up on hard surfaces. And out the bush, you can do two-wheel drive low range if something has happened in the front that's broken. You can't do four-wheel drive. Two-wheel drive low range is still going to be better than two-wheel drive high range. Now, another major one, and one of the main reasons we did it, is if you're out the bush four-wheel driving and you snap a front axle, a front CV joint, you can disconnect your hub and that'll stop that axle moving. You will be back to two-wheel drive, but your axles won't be moving, so it means you don't have to stress as much about trying to get that axle out if it's all smashed to pieces. Because what can happen if you don't get them out, they can bind up and they can break things. They can break things in your diff. With an automatic hub, once you've smashed one, even if you go back to two-wheel drive, your axle is still turning, even in two-wheel drive. With a freewheeling hub, you turn off those hubs and your axle is not moving. If you break a CV, it means you can, if you're not a mechanical person like me and you don't carry spare CVs, you don't know how to change them, then you can just disconnect those axles and you will be back to two-wheel drive. but it means that you can drive home, drive out of the bush, wherever you need to go, without having to worry about further damage and that axle binding up and breaking things further. The main obvious disadvantage with a freewheeling hub is the fact that you're going to have to get in and out of your car to lock them in and out, but you can just leave them in, okay? So it's not a major drama if you forget to, once you lock them in, it's not a major drama if you forget to disengage them once you leave the bush. It'll be just go back to the same it was with automatic hubs. So your front axles and everything will still be turning, but as long as you're not in four-wheel drive, you're not going to bind everything up. You won't be still getting drive and power to them. They'll just be moving like they were before. So if you forget to unlock them, it's no big drama. And that's the other point with these. They say that you should engage them maybe once a month for a drive down the road or something, 10k drive. Doesn't have to be in four-wheel drive, but just in two-wheel drive, and that'll get things maneuvering again and lubricate everything up. Otherwise they can get a bit dry in there from parts not moving around. I'll try and explain this as best I can because I know it is a bit confusing. Transfer case, rear, front of the car, transfer case, rear of the car. Normally two-wheel drive, your drive goes down the end to both your wheels here. That's it, you got your rear wheels driving your car. Now with four-wheel drive, it splits at 50-50. The transfer case sends 50 to the rear, 50 to the front. When you have your freewheeling hubs, you can disconnect this connection here at the front at your wheels. So that will mean that whether these are connected or not will not change four-wheel drive. As long as you're in two-wheel drive, it'll still go down to the rear of the car. But if these are connected, your front axles will be turning but with no power to them. But if they're disconnected, they won't be moving at all. They're a free object. Okay, so two-wheel drive, you just got it going to the rear. Front hubs won't change four-wheel drive or anything else. They'll just change whether those axles move or not move, because the freewheeling hubs disconnect those axles from your wheels. Once you go to four-wheel drive, you're setting at 50-50. If your hubs are unlocked, your drive will not make it all the way because your axles are disconnected at the wheels. So you will still be in two-wheel drive if you are in four-wheel drive in your car, but your hubs are in the freewheeling position, you will still be in two-wheel drive. But then as soon as you flick them over to lock, that will reconnect these axles to the wheels and you'll be back to four-wheel drive. We're going to install them now, so there we go. I don't think it'll be too hard. We'll get a few tools out. The tools for the job are some grease, circlip pliers, Allen key, 8mm for this one. This is just a bit of a lever bar to go on the Allen key because those bolts are pretty tight. Flathead screwdriver and a 10mm socket. It's pretty windy at the moment, which is a bit annoying. Hopefully it's not too noisy on the camera. Automatic hub in here. We're going to take the automatic hub out and put the freewheeling hub in. First thing, screwdriver, and just flick this off. That's just the cap on the end. There's the old hub. There's a couple of components there. We'll pull them out now. Six Allen key heads, your hex heads.
Happy with what we did.
Bucket. There it is. Yeah. They're all loosened up now. Undo them. We only had a small Allen key, so I used a bit of plumbing copper pipe so they're pretty tight. Stuck on there.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a smaller screwdriver to...
Yeah.
There you go. you get that cap off, and then this is where you need circlip pliers. I think you can do it with 2 screwdrivers, but it's a nightmare. So circlip pliers, you go. How they work is you squeeze them and they pull that circlip apart. You just got to be careful when you squeeze it that it doesn't fly off and you lose it somewhere. So there it is off. And underneath that circlip is also a little washer, which you take that off too, and then that will go back on with the circlip at the end. And now that that circlip's off, you can pull the second part of your hub out. Pull that out, and then there it is, all off. So get the new one out of the box. The hub comes in the box in one piece, but you need to pull it apart in half into 2 pieces so that way you can get the inside bolts on, and also so you can fit that circlip back on in the middle as well as grease it. So we'll go pull this in half and then we'll put it back in. Undo these screws off here. It's just a 10mm socket. Undo them all off, they're not on too tight. There it is in 2, and we also need to put those washers in there too. There's washers in the box that will, spring washers that we'll put in here. Alright, put the first half of this hub back in. We got the gasket on the bottom there, the hub. I just put a couple of screws in just to line up and get it started. They got those spring washers on them. We'll put it in and then I'll put the rest of the screws in, slot it here onto the end of the axle. There it is there. So with all these, just start them off with a nip and normally go opposite ones. Do them all to a nip and then tighten them all bit by bit opposite. And there's the last one on. They're all tight by hand. And I'll just put this bigger tool on them to get them nice and tight, get them nice and firm. Put the circlip back on with that washer underneath there.
Sort of, it's all it is, a guide washer that, so the circlip runs. So the circlip doesn't want to grab an edge and dig in and play up.
Just press it on there, a bit with a screwdriver, make sure it's on. I think I already heard it clip in there. So after we got that circlip in, that circlip was a little bit harder to get in because of the gasket, pushed the whole thing back a bit. But we did get that circlip in eventually, put a little bit of grease in the end of that, and then your second half of that hub now sits on top. You want it, I think you want it in free position. That's where we've got it in free position, and then that'll clip on, and then we'll do those final screws up. So once again, you want to do cross with them, opposites. These are only small nuts, so you don't want to put too much on them. Those bigger original ones, you can put a bit of power on them, but these only top ones, they only hold that top bit on, and they're only small, so you don't want to put too much force on them. There it is in. You got free and lock. Arrows at free. It's now a free axle. Lock it in. Now it's locked, the axle is locked, which will give you the ability to put it in 4-wheel drive. So I'll show you what happens when it is in locked. When it's in lock position now, and that axle is locked on. Do you want to switch that to free, Dad? And you hear a click, and then it's in free. And there's a free axle that is rotating because it's now disconnected from the wheel. Just a quick demonstration, because my car has automatic hubs. That way you'll be able to see what those axles do. This is in 2-wheel drive with the automatic hubs, and even in 2-wheel drive you'll be able to see that those axles do still rotate when you're driving. Alright, there it is in 2-wheel drive, and I'll get him to drive towards me. It's a little hard to film, but if you look in there you can see that CV axle is continuing to rotate with the wheels even though the car is in two-wheel drive. You could see there in mine, automatic hubs, two-wheel drive, those axles continue to rotate with the wheel. And then obviously when you go in four-wheel drive they're still rotating as well. Now Dad's MUX is not here anymore, Carl took it to work. But I'll be able to show you the same thing in his work truck, which is a four-wheel drive Rodeo that has freewheeling hubs as well. We'll put the hubs in free position, and then when he drives you'll be able to see that that axle does not move. So that's the main difference between your automatic and your freewheeling / manual hubs. With the automatic ones, the axle constantly rotates whether you're in two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, it doesn't make a difference. But with the freewheeling ones, when you put them in the free position, that axle does not move. It's only when you put them in the lock position that the hub engages to the axle and it then rotates.